Dawn. A pale, grey light creeps over the River Thames. The water is sluggish and brown, choked with refuse and the stench of the city. Boats lie moored like sleeping animals, their masts a forest of dark lines against the sky. Beyond them, the walls and towers of London rise from the mist, stone and timber, smoke and shadow. Then the bells begin. From churches great and small, their sound cuts through the morning fog. St. Paul's, looming over the city. Parish churches tucked between crooked lanes. Monasteries and priories just beyond the walls. Each bell calls the faithful to prayer and calls the city back to life. This is London in the late Middle Ages, home to perhaps 40, 50,000 souls, one of the largest cities in Christendom. Crowded, noisy, dangerous. A place where fortunes can be made and a single misstep can mean ruin. In a narrow room above a workshop, a boy wakes to the bells and the smell of smoke. His name is Thomas. He is an apprentice to a London carpenter, one of the many craftsmen who shaped the bones of this wooden city. For him, the sound of the bells is not poetic, it is practical. It means rise, work, survive. He pulls on rough woolen clothes, still stiff with yesterday's sweat and dust, and feels the chill of the morning seep through the shutters. Outside, medieval London is already stirring. The door creaks open and Thomas steps into the street. The lane is little more than a channel of mud between leaning houses. Timber frames jut out over the road, upper stories pushing toward one another until they nearly touch. A strip of sky hangs above, thin and colourless, like a faded ribbon stretched between rooftops. Underfoot, the ground is slick. The gutters between the houses carry everything the city does not want. Kitchen scraps, rotting vegetables, blood from the butcher's stalls, and human waste thrown from upper windows with a shouted warning. If you are lucky enough to hear it in time, the air is already alive. Bakers have been at work since before dawn, feeding their ovens. The smell of warm bread drifts down the street, one of the few pleasant scents in a city otherwise heavy with smoke, animals, and people. A woman sweeps her doorway, pushing yesterday's dirt into the gutter to make room for today's. A pig snuffles in the filth, turning scraps into meat for some future table. Dogs bark, chasing one another around piles of rubbish. Above it all, a haze of smoke hangs like a low ceiling, from hearth fires, from forges, from lime kilns and brewers' vats. It settles into hair and clothes, into timber and stone, into the very fabric of London life. For Thomas, this is normal. This is simply the smell of home. He hurries through the lane, past neighbours he has known all his life. A washerwoman beating clothes in a wooden tub, her hands raw and red from cold water and lye. A ragged child with bare feet, chewing slowly on a crust of yesterday's bread. A beggar at the corner chapel, backbent, murmuring for alms with eyes that have seen too much. The city is waking. Carts creak over uneven ground. Geese flap and hiss as they're driven to market. A man curses as his horse shies at a sudden clatter. Somewhere, a baby wails. Somewhere else, a door slams, and a couple continue an argument that began the night before. With every heartbeat, the streets grow more crowded. This is not a quiet medieval village. This is London, restless from the moment the bells first ring. As Thomas makes his way towards his master's errands, the shape of the city reveals itself. London sits hemmed in by walls of stone, built generations ago and patched, repaired, and strengthened over time. 12 great gates pierce these defences, each a funnel through which people and goods must pass. Newgate, Aldgate, Bishopsgate, Ludgate, and more. At night, these gates are closed and guarded. By day, they are the arteries that keep the city alive. To the south lies the river. The Thames is not just a boundary, but a lifeline. Barges and small boats carry grain, wine, wool, timber and coal. From the docks along the water's edge, men heave barrels and crates, their shouts mixing with the creak of rope and wood. And there, spanning the river, stands one of the marvels of Europe, London Bridge. This is no simple crossing. Houses and shops crowd along its length, jutting out over the water, their upper floors leaning so far that they almost touch the buildings opposite. A small, bustling town balanced above the brown current. Traders call out from their doorways. Children lean from windows to stare at boats below. At the southern end, grim trophies sometimes hang above the gate, the severed heads of traitors, blackened by time and weather, a stark reminder of royal justice. Within the walls, the city is packed. Parish presses against parish, lane against lane. The great stone bulk of St. Paul's Cathedral dominates the skyline, its tall spire piercing the clouds, visible from almost any street, if you can find a gap between the houses to see it. Around it, the heart of London beats, the marketplace of Cheapside, the merchants' halls and guild houses. The cramped tenements of the poor, pressed up against the grand houses of the wealthy. Every corner offers contrast. Every street is a collision of rich and poor, of hope and hardship. By mid-morning, London is a roar. Thomas stands in Cheapside, one of the city's great markets, sent here to buy nails and iron fittings for the workshop. Here, the wealth of England, and of lands far beyond its coasts, is on display. Stalls line the street, wooden tables piled high. Cloth merchants unfurl bolts of woolen fabric dyed in rich colours, madder red, woad blue, deep green. Each piece is worth more than Thomas will earn in months. A goldsmith displays rings, brooches and chains that glitter dully in the uncertain light, their value measured not just in metal, but in the social rank they proclaim. A fishmonger shouts the virtues of his catch, eels from the Thames, herring from the North Sea, cod from distant Atlantic waters. The fish lie on beds of damp reeds, their scales catching the light. Nearby, a butcher's stall drips with blood, carcasses of sheep and pigs hanging from hooks, the ground beneath slick and stained. Spices from the east, pepper, cinnamon, saffron, sit in small, precious piles, sold by weight to those wealthy enough to afford such luxuries. Their scents cut through the more common smells of the market, like sharp, exotic notes in a crowded song. Voices crash over one another in a constant storm. English, French, the clipped, careful accents of merchants from Flanders and the Hanseatic towns. Bargaining, boasting, arguing, joking. A merchant calls out a price. A housewife answers sharply, insisting on less. The two circle one another with words, until one of them, or both, feel they have won. Here, money changes hands as quickly as gossip. Apprentices like Thomas weave through the crowd, carrying goods or messages for their masters. For them, this is not simply noise and colour. It is a living school. The market teaches them how business is done, who can be trusted and who cannot, which rumours are dangerous and which can be safely ignored. They learn that a single storm at sea can wipe out a merchant's fortune, that a single bad harvest can send bread prices soaring, and with them, the risk of hunger and unrest. In London, prosperity is always perched on the edge of disaster. Every coin that changes hands is a small victory against that looming threat. As the sun climbs higher, Thomas returns to his master's workshop with the goods he has purchased. Inside, the air is heavy with the smell of fresh-cut wood and hot pitch. The carpenter's shop is dim, lit by thin beams of light from high windows and the open doorway. Wood shavings curl on the floor like pale ribbons. The steady rhythm of tools, saws, hammers, chisels, forms its own rough music. Here, the social ladder of medieval work is clearly visible. At the bottom is Thomas, the apprentice. He works long hours from dawn until dusk in return for food, lodging and training. His tasks are the least skilled and often the most grueling: sweeping, fetching, planing rough surfaces, holding pieces steady while others work. He has little freedom, but he has something precious: a chance. Above him stand the journeymen. These are trained craftsmen, paid in wages, who can move from workshop to workshop as work allows. They are more skilled, more respected, but still vulnerable to the whims of the economy, to sickness, to sudden misfortune. And at the top is the master. He owns the tools. He decides which jobs to take, how much to charge, who to hire. His name is on the contracts, his reputation at stake if the work is poor. He lives above or behind the workshop with his family, slightly more comfortable, but never entirely secure. Above them all, invisible but powerful, stand the guilds. The guilds of London, for carpenters, weavers, bakers, fishmongers and dozens more, shape the city's economy. They regulate trade, they enforce standards of quality, they set prices and protect their members. They sponsor altars in churches, march in civic processions, and care for their own in sickness and old age. In a world without modern banks, pensions, or insurance, a guild can be a lifeline. But the guilds also guard their privileges. To work without guild permission is to invite trouble. To sell shoddy goods is to risk fines, public shaming, even being driven out of business. For an outsider, for someone without connections, entry into a guild can be difficult or impossible. For Thomas, the path is clear but narrow. Work hard, obey, learn your craft, impress your master, save whatever coins you can. One day, perhaps, become a journeyman, and with more years, more savings, and considerable luck, purchase the right to become a master yourself. In medieval London, social mobility exists, but it is slow, fragile, and easily destroyed. One serious illness, one unpaid debt, one fire that devours your workshop. A lifetime's work can vanish in a single night. By afternoon, the bells ring again. They mark not just the passing of hours, but the rhythm of a deeply religious world. Thomas passes St. Paul's, its great spire stabbing at the sky. The cathedral is the spiritual heart of London, but also something more. Its large open churchyard is a place for meetings, for gossip, for business. Men strike deals at the very edge of consecrated ground. Lawyers linger under the open arcades, waiting for clients. Preachers raise their voices to the crowds, some authorised, others wandering visionaries or troublemakers. News from the royal court, from foreign lands, and from the wars across the Channel spreads here like fire on dry straw. The city is soaked in religion. Shrines stand at street corners, their candles flickering in the dim light of narrow lanes. Crosses mark the junctions of major roads. Almost every craft guild has its patron saint and its own altar. Days of labour are interrupted by feast days, processions, and fasts. People measure their lives not just in years, but in the turning of the church calendar. Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter, the feasts of saints, the anniversaries of the dead. Faith offers comfort and explanation. When plague came, years before Thomas was born, it tore through London like a scythe. Whole parishes were hollowed out. Streets fell silent. Houses were left empty, their doors marked, their occupants gone. Pits were dug beyond the walls to hold the dead, filled and refilled in grim succession. Some saw the disease as punishment for sin, others as a mystery, a terror without words. The memory of those years lingers still, like a shadow across the city. Older men and women still tell stories of carts piled with bodies, of priests who could not bury the dead fast enough, of wills written in haste and then never opened. Even now, death is never far, a cut that festers, a fever that will not break. Childbirth gone wrong, a fall from scaffolding, a cartwheel that slips on the mud. There are no antibiotics, no modern surgery, no hospitals as we know them today. A minor illness can become a death sentence. A broken bone can mean a life of pain and poverty. For Thomas and those like him, life is a constant negotiation with risk. They do not speak of it every day. They simply live with a faith that God sees and that the saints may intercede. They light candles. They cross themselves when they pass a church. They join processions when disaster threatens, war, famine, fire, or plague. In medieval London, faith is not an abstract idea. It is woven into every fear, every hope, every ordinary day. Evening comes to London. The market stalls begin to close. Goods are packed away, shutters drawn, bolts slid into place. The city curls in on itself as the light fades. In the narrow streets, shadows deepen. Watchmen take up their posts at the gates and patrol the lanes with lanterns and staves. The cry goes out for lights to be extinguished, for hearth fires to be banked safely. Curfews are enforced in some districts, ignored in others. For those with money, the night holds comfort. In the houses of wealthy merchants and officials, candles burn and tables groan under the weight of meat, bread and wine. Families and guests sit on sturdy benches, talking of business, politics and marriage alliances. News from abroad, letters from distant kin and rumours from the royal court are all weighed and discussed. Music may drift from a chamber, a lute, a harp, a voice raised in song. For the poor, the night is another sort of companion. Some gather in smoky alehouses, where cheap drink dulls the edge of hunger and cold. The air inside is rank with sweat, ale and smoke. Dice clatter on tabletops. Arguments flare and die down. Stories are shared, some true, some wildly exaggerated. Others huddle in cramped rooms, sharing what food they have, crowding together for warmth. A family might sleep in a single space, parents and children lying side by side on a straw mattress, listening to the muffled pulse of the city outside. A few have no door to close at all. They sleep in doorways, beneath carts, in corners of church porches, wrapped in whatever rags they can find, hoping the watch will pass them by. Crime stirs in the darkness, a cutpurse slipping through what remains of the crowd. A band of youths waiting in a side alley for a lone traveller. A brawl that turns deadly over an insult, a spilled drink, or a few lost coins. The authorities do what they can. The mayor and aldermen issue laws. Watchmen patrol. Courts sit in judgment. Stocks and pillory stand as a public warning. Whippings, brandings, and for some, the noose are all meant to keep order. Yet London is too big, too complex, too human to ever be fully controlled. Behind every law is a loophole. Behind every watchman's lantern, a stretch of darkness where other things can happen. High above the streets, in his narrow bed, Thomas listens to the muffled sounds of the city at night. Distant shouting, the bark of a dog, the rattle of cartwheels over the stones, the low crackle of unseen fires. For him, this is simply life. He does not know that future centuries will smooth these streets into tidy maps, that the wooden houses will one day burn, that the London he walks will vanish, and yet somehow remain. To him, there is only this: another day survived, another day waiting beyond the next dawn. Medieval London was not a place of quiet romance. It was crowded and filthy, loud and dangerous. A city of guilds and markets, of churches and taverns, of hope and sudden loss. A place where a boy like Thomas could, with luck and endurance, rise from apprentice to master, or vanish into the anonymous mass of the forgotten dead. Yet in its noise and smoke and struggle, the city was alive. Every day, tens of thousands of men, women and children woke to the sound of the bells, walked its twisting streets. bargained in its markets, prayed in its churches, feared its punishments, and dreamed of something better. They did not know they were medieval. They did not think of themselves as living in the Middle Ages. They were simply Londoners. This was medieval London, not a picture in a book, but a living, breathing world of shadows and light, built plank by plank, stone by stone, heartbeat by heartbeat. And for those who called it home, it was everything.